Let's program the Intro-16 print from your packet. This is a milling lines and arcs. And we need to begin by starting a brand new program. So we're going to go to, from the input screen, the Program Manager, New, Conversational Program. And we need to set up some stock geometry. So we'll go back to the input screen, Part Setup, More, Stock Geometry. We want to say yes, we want to manually size the stock. And we want to put in some size for the material. 2.5 in X, 3.8 in Y, and it is 1 inch thick in the Z. Now the upper left corner of this part is 0, so we need to slide the stock using the reference position minus 3.6, minus 3.8. Again, the control will always assume bottom left corner is 0, and we use these reference positions to move the stock into location. So now we've moved it down, thereby making the upper left corner 0. We need to set up some tools for this job, and it says we need a 3/4 inch end mill, and I already have a 3/4 inch end mill described in my library, so I don't need to set the tool up at this time. Let's go right into part programming then. This is going to be a milling operation, and it's lines and arcs. Now, as discussed in the teaching portion of the video for lines and arcs, we talked about lines and arcs being done at one block and multiple segments. The segments begin with segment 0, and that's the only place that we will be entering a starting point. From that point on, segment 1 through whatever is necessary to create the feature will all be done as endpoints. The other information that's put in segment 0 is the tooling, milling type, speeds and feeds, and so forth. So let's begin. We decided that we're going to start the upper right corner of this part. We're going to program down and to my left, because the direction in which I program will determine whether we climb or conventional mill this particular feature. And we want to climb mill on a CNC machine as much as possible. So the very first thing I need to figure is, where am I going to start? Well, I'm going to start off the part if I can. So I want to start above the 0 a little bit, or above the part on the y-axis. But the x-axis is actually a print dimension, so I'm going to put that in as 2.25. Now the top of the part is 0, and I want to start above the part a little bit more than at least the radius of the tool. Using a 3/4 inch end mill, the radius of that would be 3/8. So I'm going to start a positive 0.5, a little more than the radius, above the part. My Z start will be 0.1. The final depth of this feature is minus 0.5. I'm going to select my tool from the list. It's a 3/4 inch end mill. And I'm going to be doing cutter comp left. That completes everything on the first tab. Now I'm going to select Next Segment. Now this next segment is going to be a line traveling straight down at 270 degrees to the first intersection where it meets the 45-degree line, which will become our second segment. So we're going to select Line, and we're going to program the information that we know. If we do not know a piece of information, we simply leave it blank. We don't put 0 because that is a value. Do we know the endpoint in X of this first line? We do. It is 2.25. That's a print dimension. But we do not know, without doing some trig, what the y-axis endpoint of that first line is. So we simply enter past it or leave it blank. We don't know the length of that line either. If we did, it would be easy to figure the y end. So we need the XY length blank as well. We do, however, know the angle. If I started up at the top and I moved down toward this first intersection, that is a 270-degree move. I know that piece of information. It may or may not help the control figure out the other missing points, but I know it. I'm going to put it in there. Now I go to the next segment. This is now also a line, and it's the 45-degree line that moves down and to my left. I don't know the endpoint in X of that line, but I do know the endpoint in Y, and that's going to be a minus 3.688. However, on this one, I also know the length and the angle. The length is 0.646. It's a print dimension. And the angle is going to be 270 degrees minus 45, or 180 plus 45. Either way, I get 225 degrees. Now notice that the endpoint in X has been able to calculate now because we've given it enough information. The CAL next to that field indicates that that's a calculated value. If you look to the right, you'll see the X, Y, and Z start. The Y start of this line, or what would have been the Y end of the previous segment, which we didn't know, has now been calculated. We've actually given the control enough information to backfigure to the beginning everything we didn't know to this point. So we'll continue on with our final line segment. Next segment is a line. We don't know the endpoint as a print dimension because we're going to travel off the part just as we started off the part in Y at the beginning. If I started off at Y, my very first segment 0 of a ½ inch, I might as well travel past 0 by a ½ inch in Y or in X as well. So I'm going past 0 to the left, so that would be a negative 0.5. The Y end is a minus 3.688, which is a print dimension. And you see that that was able to calculate both the length and the direction of that line. If I hit the draw button on my console, draw options and draw, we see this feature is correctly programmed and our graphics looks just like our print.